Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Wednesday, December 8th, and we're going to look back at what was a tumultuous season on the gridiron for Virginia Tech football. Also look at some new coaching and player news from the football program, and we will take a look at these two upcoming basketball games for the Hoops team against Cornell tonight and Dayton on Sunday. All of that and much more coming up on episode 215 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you into episode 215 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. However you are listening, whether that's archived on Apple Music, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, or if you are on our YouTube channel, make sure if you are on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe to the Tech Sideline YouTube channel. And if you are live in the stream, be sure to leave a question or comment for Will and Chris. We'll get to those with Katie at the end of the show. As always, the Tech Sideline Podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. The wrestling season in full swing. 2 big wins over the weekend on the road against Northern Iowa and Missouri. You can help continue to grow that and bring Olympic hopeful athletes to Blacksburg. Please visit southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. On episode 215 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, usual Wednesday crew on set. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of TechSideline.com across the way. To my right, it is Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist to my right. I've got that already. Katie Adams in the fourth chair once again. Does a great job every time. Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, our best podcast producer in the land. And I'm Jake Lyman, your host, who can't get words out of his mouth today. Lot to go over in this episode of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Main focus is going to be looking back at the football season. A weird year for this team. Started strong, ended with Justin Fuente being removed from his position as head coach. We will get to that in this first half of the podcast, but first, we've got a little bit of a news roundup to go through with the football program, and the big news over the last couple of days, a defensive coordinator has been hired by Brent Pry, and that is Chris Marve, the former Florida State linebackers coach. Thoughts on the hire so far, guys?
We don't know. Yes, his title is defensive coordinator. What we know about Brent Pry is I think he's very focused on running his own personal defense. So he was not going to go out and hire some $1.5 million defensive coordinator, because then that guy'd be bringing in his own defense.
See, I thought he was, but you're right. He's not gonna.
Right. I mean, Brent Pry, he's been a long-time defensive coordinator. He's going to run the defense that he wants, so he's going to hire coaches who know how to run his own defense. So the hires he's made make complete sense in that regard. And he said at his press conference that, he's going to give up defensive play calling duties at some point, and he doesn't know whether that's going to be after the spring or if it's going to be after the first season or when. So we'll see. I think he's hiring coaches that know how to coach his defense, and when he feels like Marv is ready to actually take over the play calling, he'll turn it over to him. But, I don't think it's any secret that Pry is going to be very involved in defensive game planning on a week-to-week basis. He's going to be just as much a defensive coordinator as anybody else on that staff.
Yeah, so I've had my head in other areas. What's the connection between Marv and Pry?
He played for Pry at Vanderbilt,
yeah. Right,
and coached under him for at least a year or two there before Pry went to Penn State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so liked what he saw back then, and there's always those players. I remember I was talking to my buddy Richie Davis about Mike Young, because Richie and Mike Young went to high school together at Radford High. Richie and I are the same age, and Mike was a couple years older than us, and we had this whole conversation about, I just assumed Mike Young, since he's such a good basketball coach, would have started for his high school team, right? No, but he was like a backup, and I was like, Richie, Mike didn't even start, and Richie said he did not. But the thing about Mike, even back in high school, he was always the grown-up in the room. You always knew he was going to be a coach. So I think Pry probably saw some of that same stuff in Marv, saw him as a player, and thought, that's a guy that looks like a future coach.
And Marv Young, first-time defensive coordinator at just 32 years old. And you would think even if he did bring in his own defense or his own philosophy, it'd be pretty similar to Pry's. Yeah. You play under him and you get your coaching start under him. You'd think it's pretty similar philosophies.
You see some similarities in Pry's defense to Bud Foster's as far as the types of defensive linemen he likes to recruit. It's going to be a little bit different going from Justin Hamilton's schemes to Pry's scheme as far as how the defensive linemen are used. I think this is my basic understanding of the defense without doing heavy research, is that as far as the upfront stuff goes, it's going to be a little more Bud Foster than it was Justin Hamilton. So, and Pry, his first coaching job really was a GA under Bud Foster, right? So imagine that. You're a young, impressionable coach, and you learn a lot of your future philosophies from that first guy you coached under.
And that would be Pry for Marv. Marv also coached, we mentioned when the Pry hire was made, Pry recruited Zach Cunningham and Oren Burks, both to Vanderbilt, both NFL players. Cunningham actually got cut today from the Houston Texans. But Marv was the one who developed those guys as the linebackers coach. So, again, looking at the possible player development standpoint of this hire, it seems like he's had a pretty good resume.
I think so. You get a couple of NFL players from Vandy, right? Oren Burks is from the state of Virginia.
Yep.
And went to Vanderbilt and developed into an NFL player there, and now he plays for the Packers. So I think Marv seems to be a good player developer. The Florida State linebackers got better after he arrived. Florida State fans are complaining that he only signed 3-star linebackers.
Yeah, that he doesn't recruit.
Well, while they were sitting around, getting their butts kicked for several years with a bunch of 5-star linebackers. So it's all about development and culture to me. That's what Florida State's missing, not 5-star linebackers.
So to draw a parallel, as we were talking about Marv only being 32 years old, I thought, well, how old was Bud Foster when he became defensive coordinator? Bud was born in 1959, so he became co-DC in 1995, I believe. So he would have been 36. So a little bit older than Marv. And like Marv, Bud was a linebackers coach, before he was a defensive coordinator. Now, he did get to learn at the feet of Phil Almasian, Frank Beamer's Frank Beamer. I'm sure he taught Bud a lot of things, but I think Bud's career really took off when Phil Almassian came through here, and it seemed to be that Bud picked everything up from him, and he was co-DC with Rod Sharpless in 1995, and then Sharpless, I like to call it, committed career suicide by going to Rutgers, which seemed like an okay move at the time, but then Rutgers became one of the worst teams in college football, along with Temple over the next few years. And Bud became the full-time DC in 1996, so he would have been 37, not a whole lot older than Marv, and less well-traveled. He coached under Frank, played under Frank, and coached under Frank.
And that was it.
And he turned out to be a great DC. So, I think this all makes sense, what you're saying about him not hiring an established guy who's set in his ways, doesn't want the head coach looking over his shoulder. And the age thing, we've had a great defense coordinator who wasn't all that old when he became the DC.
Yeah, a lot of guys get coordinator jobs young these days. The Jim Leonard guy at Wisconsin was, I want to say 33 or 34 when he got that coordinator job. And I think we pay attention to it more these days because you can just look these guys' age up on Wikipedia. We've got all the information right at our fingertips. But I'm guessing plenty of young guys have gotten coordinating jobs before, back in the day, back before you could just look it up.
Yeah, and it's just like recruiting where you can see the stars and the rankings, but you can't see all the other stuff.
Yeah.
You can look at a guy's Wikipedia entry and see where he's been and what he's done, but you can't see all the other stuff.
And I think I think Pry's going to be very hands-on with the defense.
Yeah.
I think he's going to dedicate a lot of his monetary resources that have been provided to offensive coaching, is what it seems like from the outside looking in.
So that's the next logical step you take mentally is, okay, if he's hiring a defensive staff that he's going to develop, what's he going to hire on the offensive side of the ball?
And you have a first-time head coach, first-time defensive coordinator. Do you think he looks for a little more experience on the offensive side?
You would hope,
at certain positions. Some of the names we're hearing floating around is like Tyler Bowen, who was a co-offensive coordinator at Penn State. He's now with Urban Meyer on the Jaguar staff. We've even heard Joe Brady mentioned. We've even heard Holman Wiggins mentioned.
Right.
And the thing is, I don't know if any of those guys would be like full-fledged OC. I could see a co-offensive coordinator thing with a co-offensive coordinator who's like running game coordinator and another passing game coordinator.
And we've seen that more often, not only in college, in the NFL too. You have those two guys who run the two different aspects of the offense separately.
Yeah, and a guy like, he's obviously familiar with Brady. My concern with Brady is, he was at LSU for 1 year, and he wasn't even their offensive coordinator. He was their passing game coordinator and their wide receivers coach. And he was in that position for 1 year when they had the best quarterback of the decade in college football.
And two generational wide receivers.
Exactly. And and he leveraged that into an NFL coordinator job and didn't last very long there. He's only 32 years old. And I'm not even concerned about the age. It's just like there's not much of a resume there. Like he's only been he was never even a coordinator until he got to the NFL, which is insane to think about. Yeah. Or he's not a full-fledged coordinator. I would actually love a co-coordinator deal with a guy like Holman Wiggins running the passing game, and oh gosh, what was the other guy's name? I'm totally blanked. The Penn State, the Jackson. Tyler Bowen, yeah, right. With Bowen doing the running game. Bowen is an elite Mid-Atlantic recruiter, and Wiggins is also an elite recruiter.
Okay, I'll take him.
You
talked me into it.
No, we talked last week on this show about when you give the head coach a certain amount of money, and people want to see some names in there, right? You don't want to just hire your buddies and just give them big salaries, right? That's not what people want to see. I sense that there is some concern that that's happened to a certain extent on the defensive side of the ball, and I understand.
I think that's fair.
And I think Derek Jones is a very, very good coach, and I expect he had other offers. If Ryan Smith remains on the staff, Virginia Tech will have had to outbid other teams because he has multiple offers, is my understanding. Right. And we don't even know that Quinn is actually going to be a coach yet, right? he could be like some super analyst role. It's possible.
Because Quinn was only making like $90,000 a year.
Yes,
right?
yeah, at Savannah State. So we'll see. I mean, just let the staff fill out completely before you judge it. But I think that's okay on the defensive side of the ball, where Pry himself is going to have such a heavy influence.
Yeah.
I do think it's appropriate to spend on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't want to spend on just anybody just for the sake of spending. But if you want Bowen and he's in the NFL, you can afford him now. I mean, quite frankly, NFL teams cannot outbid college teams for coaches anymore. As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Joe Brady. I want to look at we'll maybe take a shot at UVA here, because it looks like they're in deep talks to hire Tony Elliott as their new head coach. Would it be a similar situation there? Tony Elliott had a lot of success with first-round picks on his team, but once you take those away, it becomes a little bit tougher.
Well, Clemson's offense got better as the season went on. By the end of the season, they were rolling pretty well. Still not quite at the efficiency levels that we've seen in the past. But the thing about Tony Elliott is he's being hired for a different role.
He's not being hired to be the offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
that's
right.
true.
Yeah, he's being hired to be the head coach. So to me, like, his resume doesn't change, at least in my eyes. But Brady, I agree. Brady would be splash. Like that would.
It's a big name.
That would excite people, because he's a guy that people have talked about, and they've talked about him during a national championship game before that LSU was won. But quite frankly, his resume is barely exists.
And he was the guy to hire after that national championship run, because everybody wants to find the Sean
It was the hot name. Yeah. It was the style hire instead of the substance hire.
The young offensive coach.
I'm not saying that he's not a good coach. I don't know whether he is or not. There's just not enough evidence either way. I mean, he was at LSU for 1 year with the best players in the country available to him, and then he went to the NFL and got fired. Like, I not going to hold the NFL thing against him, because the NFL is a completely different job than college, completely different circumstances. So I doubt he's as bad as Carolina Panthers fans say he is. I also doubt he's as good as what people said about him at LSU. The bottom line is he just hasn't been coaching long enough for there to be enough evidence.
So let me give Tech fans something to think about it. So you're a Tech fan, you're sitting out there saying, okay, so we've got $1.5 million, maybe the very top end. We've got somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million to go hire an offensive coordinator. That's a good salary to go get a good established offensive coordinator. Well, there's more to it than just that. A good established offensive coordinator is going to have other options.
And he's already got a job.
In your price range, right?
Yeah.
So what he's going to start asking himself is what any coach asks himself. If I go into that situation, will I do well? Can I compete and look good? Or in the case of a head coach, can I go win football games? In the case of a coordinator, will I have the tools at my disposal where the things that I'm trying to implement can actually be executed? And that is getting to be, and I'm sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm going to say things you don't want to hear. Who's the quarterback? Could be Braxton Burmeister. He misses a lot of time with injuries. Okay, how's the offensive line? Well, rapidly disappearing one by one to either the transfer portal or bowl opt-outs or NFL dreams. Oh, what you got at wide receiver? Guys who transfer out a mile a minute. So this is you can't just throw money at people and they'll say sure. You have to show them that the situation.
Yeah, because this is a bad enough situation with personnel on offense that, like, they could get fired. Like, it might be a multi-year rebuild job, and people aren't very patient these days.
Yeah.
So you take the wrong job, you get fired. Let me tell my Scott Loeffler story. Loeffler's been gone long enough that I can tell this story. But yeah, he was telling us off the record one time that, he was all excited to get the Auburn offensive coordinator job. Oh, I'm an offensive coordinator in an SEC school. Woohoo. So he goes into the very first workout and sees his quarterbacks throw the ball, and he went home and told his wife, and he was like, yeah, don't make any friends, because we're not going to be here very long, because we're all going to get fired because we don't have a quarterback who can throw the ball.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very...
And he turned out to be right, correct?
Correct, absolutely. And then guess what? He ended up here, and look at the personnel he inherited here.
Yeah.
So...
Not to mention that if you're an offensive coordinator, you're coming into this position with a first-time head coach who who is a defense-oriented
Right.
coach.
So you are the guy on the offensive side of the ball.
To me, if I was an offensive coordinator, it's yes, pay me a good salary, of course. I'd be more interested in the length of the contract, and I don't want a 1-year deal. I don't even think I'd settle for a 2-year deal. Like it's such a rebuild job that I would prefer a 3-year deal. If I were a prospective candidate,
I think that is reasonable. That used to be. Correct me if I'm wrong. Most assistant coaches were like 1-year contracts.
I think what gave Virginia Tech an advantage in the past is they used to give their assistants
they did 2-year contracts when Frank was the head coach, and I don't know. That's up for Witt and Brent Pry to figure out.
Yeah,
and that is a tough sell to make to a possible offensive coordinator. We just lost our starting center, our starting left guard, our wide receiver 1, our wide receiver 2, our tight end. Here you go. Here's everybody else, and
we don't even know if these guys are coming back. By the way,
yes.
Right.
So the
portal makes it easier these days to a certain extent. I would imagine that a guy like Joe Brady, just the flashiness of his name, would make transfer portal quarterbacks that would make their ears perk up. Just his name.
Could say, I could be the next Joe Burrow, who
right.
elevated himself from maybe undrafted to the number 1 overall pick in one year.
Exactly, after he hit the portal.
Yes. So that'll be interesting. Again, defensive staff almost completely filled up at this point. If Ryan Smith does decide to stay, I believe that would be almost all of the main defensive positions if Sean Quinn is the linebacker.
So you would have Smith and Jones in the secondary, 1 coach in safeties, 1 coach in corners. Marv, I assume, coaching linebackers as defensive coordinator. Price as a defensive line. And if Quinn's not in some sort of like quality control, super assistant to the head coach or whatever, then he'd be like your other defensive line coach, I guess. Right. So it'd be a similar setup to what Tech has right now as far as how they space out responsibilities.
And they're flying around the Commonwealth right now. The social media presence has been fantastic the last couple of days. Coach Cheetah continues to impress fans, I think. His video yesterday with Brent Pry for Danny Joe Harrell and he was asking fans to come up with Brent Pry's new profile picture on Twitter yesterday, which I thought was funny.
Did they finally find one?
They did. He found a family picture, but some of the answers in the responses were pretty funny. Yeah. So if you want to check that out, go to Coach Cheetah.
I did like the picture of them on jet skis.
Yes, that was fantastic.
Coach DJ Cheetah on Twitter, right?
I think so.
I think that's his handle.
Go check that out. Sometime on Tuesday, he tweeted out, "We need a new profile picture for Coach Pry on Twitter." And some of the responses to that were pretty funny. People came up with some creative stuff.
And he's a guy we need to have on the podcast. I'm sure he'd be a great guest.
Yeah.
He's written a book, basically about. It's basically a book full of motivational sayings and things like that. And
well, and he tweets one every morning too.
Right, he does. And
that sounds familiar.
He donates the proceeds from the book to like something back home from where he's from, like students who are seeking college educations but can't afford it. I don't know. You have to do more research, but I'm sure he would love to come on the podcast and promote his book one day.
I'm sure he would, and I bet he'd have a good personality to be on here too.
Yep.
So that'll be fun. Now it's time to look back. Obviously, we're excited to look forward at what the staff's going to look like, what the future of Virginia Tech football will look like. But time to look back at the 2021 season. This was a season that had a really strong start. You beat a top 10 team in North Carolina to start off the season, beat Middle Tennessee State by 21 points, felt like a good win there. But then you start to have some tough games, close losses. West Virginia, the red zone struggles there, blown leads against Notre Dame and Syracuse. And then you had the really bad losses, Pittsburgh, Boston College, and then Miami pulls away in the end. The Fuente era comes to an end mid-season, and bowl eligibility saved at the very end. Commonwealth Cup win for J.C. Price versus UVA. I'm going to have you guys go through some awards for this season, favorite game, worst game, newcomer of the year, your MVPs. But first, just looking back, just impression of the season. Obviously, a roller coaster ride from the very beginning, but obviously, in the very end, a change was made.
It's odd that one of your actually favorite moments in Virginia Tech football history, or some of your favorite moments, really come in a season that is considered a bad season.
Yeah.
So, like, that UNC game was awesome. It was one of my favorite games in Tech history, just like the 2003 Miami game.
Yeah.
And what did we talk about after Tech beat UNC? We said, now you got to turn it into something. Make it mean something like the 95 Miami game. don't make it just some magical moment in time like the 2003 Miami game when Tech went on to lose like 5 or 6 or whatever down or 4 or 5 down the stretch, and it turned out to just be, fool's gold.
Yeah,
basically. And that's kind of what the UNC game ended up being, but it was a great moment in time. And then it's kind of bookended by, like, you go up and you beat UVA, and there's J.C. Price smoking a cigar on their field.
And it was Bronco Mendenhall's last game.
Oh, man, yeah.
Yes.
So both of those moments were awesome, and they bookended the season, but everything in between, not so awesome.
Yeah, if you look at the first game of the season and just the last game of the season, you might say, man, Virginia Tech had a great year.
Yeah. They were smoking cigars on UVA's home field.
Beat a top 10 team.
Beat a top 10 team.
That sandwich had really good bread, but there was nothing good in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So the UNC game, I've said this, I thought that the coaching staff and the sports information department at Tech treated the offseason the proper way. Mm-hmm. They let Fuente get out and say positive things and be in front of people. Not they let him. They probably encouraged him, because I don't think that was really in his wheelhouse. I mean, he came on the Tech Sideline podcast.
Yeah.
And,
did a good job.
He did a great job. The reviews of that, people were just, they loved it, because he was so personable and engaged and all that stuff. And some of the things he said in the preseason, I feel better about the passing game than I've ever felt since we've been here. Those were not the wrong things to say.
Yep.
Did he set the bar of expectations too high? Possibly. It wasn't just that for me. It was some of the stuff we knew behind the scenes, where they were finally getting a decent nutrition center, and they had the weight room put together so they could do.
Recruiting was going really well over the summer, over that period of time leading into the season.
There was all this positive momentum, and in retrospect, a lot of the same issues reared their heads. We said going into the season, Braxton Burmeister's got to stay healthy. And he stayed healthy for about 30 minutes of football, And it's interesting you mentioned that Miami game and this UNC game. Those were actually two very similar games where the defense dominated and the offense struggled, didn't do a whole lot, didn't do anything in the second half.
In the Miami game, Virginia Tech completed one pass that went past the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, it was
and still won the game 31-7. That's how incompetent Miami was under Larry Coker, right?
Yeah.
Well, Virginia Tech coached circles around UNC that night.
They really did, but it was classic Justin Fuente coaching staff being ready for that first game, and then the other stuff just started to pop up as the season went along.
Yeah.
Because they had great opening games before.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the battle at Bristol wasn't one of them.
The game plan was good enough.
Yeah.
They outcoached Tennessee's coaching staff that night. They just kept fumble the game away.
Yeah, but you go back to the WVU game in 2017, Florida State game in 2018, and I know not all of these were season openers.
That first big game, a lot of times, is so much about the X's and O's, because both teams are kind of unknown to each other about what they're going to do with their personnel and with new players and everything like that, especially if it's a non-conference game. But after that, it becomes more the other stuff. So his positives as a coach, and that I think he's a really, really good pure football coach. Like his 11 robots would beat most other teams' 11 robots, right? And but he doesn't have robots. He's got human beings.
He has young men. He has to manage.
Right. So his those big early season games when it's just mostly about coaching, that really makes his strengths as a coach stand out. But once you get into the rest of the season where it's all CEO stuff, like everybody knows your X's and O's at that point. There's no secrets for schematically, and it's all about how much did your players develop in the offseason and how big and strong and fast.
How deep is your roster?
Exactly. So those things catch up to you throughout the course of the season, and that's sort of what happened to him throughout his tenure, I think.
So looking back at that UNC game, Sam Howell had all the hype coming in. UNC was ranked 10th in the country. And I remember a lot of the discussion after that game was that Tech got him early, and that was a good thing because UNC was going to be good later. And that never happened either.
No, they
wound up being a 500 football team.
Yep.
Right. And so that doesn't take the air out of the experience that night, because the other thing to remember is this was the first game after COVID. And the first game where you had a full Lane Stadium and you got to see people jump around to enter Sandman. These are – I've already kind of forgotten. Like I can't stand throughout the season this year, like if there was an ACC matchup coming up, the ACC network would replay those two teams when they played in 2020. And I didn't watch any of that stuff. I don't want to see empty stadiums, and so I think I know I've kind of buried the memory that all that happened. And that's what made part of that night so special was all of it. And college football, that was a Friday night game.
Yep.
One of the first games that weekend. And all of college football celebrated all of that. There was a video of the Enter Sandman entrance that wound up on Twitter that got millions of views.
It might have gotten over 10 million at one point.
Yeah, it got millions for a little different reason, though. Remember everybody?
Well, yeah, everybody was arguing,
Yes.
masks and vaccines and things and the comments of it.
But still, a 6-6 season for Virginia Tech. But I think we do forget about a year ago we weren't allowed inside Lane Stadium, and now you had 7 opportunities to go watch the Hokies play and jump to Enter Sandman. I think that is something that comes out of this season that you can't take for granted that you were allowed back in the stadium, and hopefully that never happens again. But that was at least a good experience for this season, even though the results may have not come out the way everyone wanted them to.
Had a lot of good tailgates.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Going back to Justin Fuente being good about preparing when he has a little bit more time, we talk about season openers, but even the Notre Dame game, there was not a lot of excitement for Virginia Tech heading into that one because they had just come off that very underwhelming win against Richmond. But they went into that game against Notre Dame, who finished as a top 5 team in the country and should have won that game if it weren't for a crazy 2-point conversion and just a field goal at the very end.
I thought Tech matched up well in that game going into it, and I think I picked Tech to win that game, and like in a close game.
I think you might have.
Yeah.
I'm looking it up
because David. Yeah, I know I did because David picked.
David
Notre
was
Dame,
the only one who picked Notre Dame,
and that's how he pulled ahead of us in our competition throughout the year. Notre Dame did not have a good offense at that point in the season. Virginia Tech's defense was playing well at that point in the season, so I thought that game was going to be low scoring, and I thought Tech had a lot of advantages in playing at home. They would win a low scoring game, and it was higher scoring than most people thought, but the game was right there to be won. And they were up by 9 with 5 minutes left?
8. 9 was the Syracuse game.
9 was the Syracuse game. Yeah.
Yeah, so Chris, you predicted Virginia Tech 20, Notre Dame 17. David picked Notre Dame 16, Virginia Tech 14. And I picked Tech 20, Notre Dame 17. So, yeah, we all foresaw a low-scoring game, and that's not really what happened.
Right, and that was the point where I thought it's so weird that, like, you have so much positive momentum after the North Carolina game. Like, everything went well over the summer. You got new facilities. You've got a top 25 recruiting class so far. You just beat a top 10 team. Everything's great. Everything's going uphill. But after the Notre Dame game, you're 3-2. And I remember just sitting there thinking, man, we've got Pitt next week, and they're a horrible matchup, and we're going to be 3-3. And I said before the Notre Dame game that I thought we were going to beat Notre Dame and then lose to Pitt. So it wasn't like I was getting negative because we just lost. But I'm sitting there thinking, yep, I think we're going to – I know how the season's going to end. We're going to be looking for a new coach. And because we're 3-2, we just blew an 8-point lead with 5 minutes left, and now we have Pitt on the schedule next. So – I think I know how this is going to end. Actually, like before the season started, I got invited to Cabo this week, like the week that we're currently in, and I was like, we might be doing a coaching search then. I better not commit to going to Cabo. And sure enough, it was the
probably
way it worked out.
Yeah. Yep.
And that Pitt game, I remember sitting on this set the Wednesday before that game, and none of us gave Tech a chance to win that one, and we ended up being correct. Let's give out some awards for the season here. Let's start with games. So we're not going to say our best game. We're going to say what was your favorite game of the season. It can be for any reason. I think there's 2 obvious choices here, but you've got the Duke blowout. You've got the Georgia Tech win, but it feels like UNC or UVA probably the main choices here.
I missed
Man, that's hard.
I had more people in town for the Notre Dame game. So my overall day-long experience was best for the Notre Dame game. So as opposed to UNC.
So that the Notre Dame game probably favorite game up until the last 5 minutes of the game.
5 minutes. It was absolutely my favorite all-day experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. Notre Dame was ranked number 14 in that game, and they wound up being. Did they wind up being fifth?
Fifth. They won every game after that.
Their only loss was Cincinnati.
Yep.
I just did not see a team that night that was that good.
Well, and heading into that game, everybody kind of wrote them off because they only beat Wisconsin because they had 2 pick sixes and a punt return for a touchdown before that. And
people forget that they were a really well coached team that was going to get better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Brian Kelly's a great coach.
Yes.
That's why he's not there anymore. Right.
So I would have to say it's got to be the UNC game because I had fun all day long. You know, the UVA game, my expectations were not high. I did not strut in the Scott Stadium thinking, you know, we're bringing the cup with us, but we're taking it back home with us also. It turned out to be. I thought the post game of UVA was pretty special. I stayed in Scott Stadium and watched all that stuff and went down on the field, and it just felt like an entire program was enjoying itself that night in a way they had struggled to all year long. So I have a hard time picking a favorite between those two. They were both very enjoyable for very different reasons.
Yeah, definitely. UNC, maybe a little more hope going in, a little more hope coming out. But UVA, obviously always great to beat the rival, and obviously a big win for J.C. Price and that team. Now we go to least favorite game. Little more options here. Looking at the 6 losses, I assume it would be a loss you would pick. Maybe Richmond sneaks in there. But what would be your least favorite game of the season?
You know, you're tempted to say Pitt, but like what happened in the Pitt game was exactly what I thought was going to happen, so I can't be too disappointed.
All right.
It's got to be West Virginia. It's your rival, and you have a chance to win the game. You get off to a horrible start to begin with, but then you get yourself back in it, and then Jermaine Waller comes up with a great play, and you got the ball first and goal to win the game. You got 4 chances to score, and you don't do it. That's definitely, and that's the mood of the fan base really started going downhill at that point.
Yeah, so to remind everyone, Tech was 2-0, and that game was really all that was standing in between them because they had Richmond the next week.
We were talking College game day in Blacksburg for the Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
And within a matter of weeks after that, we had fired our coach.
And Tech probably would have been ranked higher than Notre Dame heading into that game as well. Notre Dame was 14. Yeah. I think Tech probably would have been 10, 11?
Probably.
Yeah. Virginia Tech was number 15
in
that WVU game, which in retrospect just sounds preposterous.
Sounds preposterous.
You know, but there they were. I don't know for me.
There's so many options.
For me, it's although the Boston College game was pretty hideous, it's the Pittsburgh game for me because, you know, it's when you're talking about the endeavors of young men, one of the worst words you can use is flaccid.
I don't know.
That game
want to know where
flaccid.
you're going with this. Yes, it was, though. Okay.
I mean, it was just weak. It was limp. There was just nothing to it. You knew it couldn't get the job done.
I actually don't remember anything about the game.
This clip's not I
watched it.
If you can't visualize how Tech played in that game, I don't know what's going to.
I mean, I know how they played. I just I don't really remember any specific plays from it. Is all I'm saying.
I just remember leaving. Yeah. You know, I left at halftime. I'm like, this is
going exactly.
I think that was.
Oh, I remember the Tavion Robinson catch. That's the one thing I remember. His touchdown catch with the one hand.
Yes.
This was like the only good thing that happened all day, and I remember that. Other than that game is like erased from my memory.
I mean, there are a lot of options. I think the only loss that I don't think would qualify as worst game is probably Miami. I don't think that one would even be in the conversation, but Notre Dame and Syracuse, you blow those late leads. That could be one.
So many options, Jake.
Boston College obviously was just.
You remember?
Maybe we should put a poll on the site.
We should.
Well, what was the most depressing moment?
So you remember the story with me in the Syracuse game was that I was down in Florida visiting because it was my 25th anniversary. So my wife and I went to Florida, and I watched that game on my phone on this awful streaming website that it was very difficult to navigate the ads. But I just remember just thinking, expecting Virginia Tech was going to lose it. So when Syracuse makes probably the best offensive play they made all season to win the game, I just gave a wry chuckle, and, well, there it is.
What I remember about that game is Peter Moore had down the punt at the 2-yard line, right? And the crazy thing is that punt hit at the 3. bounced straight up and then landed at the 2, which is it's like the most amazing punt I've ever seen. And I just nudged my buddy and he goes, they're going to about to go 98 yards for a touchdown right here. And then they went
Redneck's famous last words, hey, y'all, watch this.
Yeah. Obviously, Notre Dame, Syracuse mentioned those blown losses. West Virginia. I think I would go with West Virginia with you. I think that one was just painful to watch because, first of all, Tech had no reason to be, or there was no reason they should have been in that game. But then at the end, there was no reason they should have lost it too.
Plus, it's West Virginia.
Yes, on the road. Hokies.
First loss is always the hardest too.
Yeah.
Yes,
and yeah, because that's when your undefeated season goes awry.
Yeah.
But and West Virginia didn't turn out to be a good team either.
No, they didn't. They got a good defense, but they can't play offense.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So that was our depressing award to give out, least favorite game. Now let's get into some players. Before we get into it, we're going to do offensive and defensive MVP. Who was your newcomer of the year? This could be a transfer. This could be a freshman. I think there's a couple of good options here.
Give me my options.
So I wrote down these 3. We'll do this like an award show. These are our nominees for newcomer of the year for
Is
Virginia
there one
Tech
on each
football.
side of the ball?
There's 3.
Overall?
I've got 2 offensive, 1 defensive. At running back, Malachi Thomas. Great couple of games, but not as much down the stretch.
Not his fault.
Tay Daly, transfer from Vanderbilt at safety. And then Caden Moore at right guard. Maybe not the sexy pick.
That sexy pick, right.
But up front, he held his own all season long.
I would go Caden Moore on offense for sure, and I would go Jordan Williams on defense.
Jordan, I should have written.
Who are the
Jordan
nominees on defense?
We'll do Tay Daly.
So you gave 3 overall.
I gave 3 overall for newcomer of the year. If you guys want to do offense and defense too, I should have written down Jordan Williams.
Jordan Williams, as far as I see it, partly won us 2 football games.
It's true.
The first and the last to get in the bookend.
Sam Howell.
All right, so the play against Sam Howell when Sam Howell decided to pull his Ryan Willis and throw it above his head down the field.
Yeah.
And then the end of the game when he got in there and knocked it loose against UVA to force the safety.
Yeah. And Peter Moore doesn't count because he played a little bit last year. He's listed as a freshman.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Let's see. I will go.
You could also throw Parker Clements in there.
Parker Clements
who
too.
also had a great year.
Yeah.
I thought.
It's hard to pick offensive linemen though.
It is.
So I'd have to go probably with Jordan Williams also.
So Jordan,
I don't know. I'm digging Malachi Thomas though. If properly utilized all season long, what could he have done?
yes. So that's the question. Malachi Thomas, I think if he had gotten as many touches in the last 3 games as he did in that 3-game stretch, Syracuse and what was the other one? Georgia Tech. Yes. So
my guess about Thomas is he's so skinny that he was wearing down and was probably banged up.
Could be.
I mean, he's got to hit the weight room. I mean, you can't give that dude the ball 20-plus times.
If he wants to be Lee Suggs, he's got to hit that weight room.
Yep. So I thought I was glad that he started getting playing time, but in that Syracuse and then the Georgia Tech game, when he was getting 20-plus carries and Blackshear was getting like 10 or 12, I thought it should have been reversed.
So, Jordan Williams did get to play every single game, stayed healthy,
Yes.
right? So, yeah.
And Jordan Williams declaring for the draft as well, which was expected. Would Jordan Williams be your defensive MVP too? I think, honestly, it could be Jordan Williams or Tay Daly, 2 of the newcomers.
It would have to be one of those 2, in my opinion. I think Daly was the only consistent safety for Virginia Tech this year. And he came up with some big plays for the Hokies. Broke up some passes down the field against UNC, broke up the pass to end the game against UVA. I would still probably go Jordan Williams. Tech's defense struggled against the run this year, but generally speaking, it was not an issue with the defensive tackles. It was more the linebackers and the safeties filling.
Right.
Did not maintain gap integrity and things like that. So I go Jordan Williams.
To me, it's crazy to say, because if you had told us halfway through the season that the defensive MVP would not be Jermaine Waller,
exactly.
I think I would have told you were crazy. He had 4 interceptions in the first 4 games.
And they were all elite interceptions,
Yes.
and they were all big interceptions.
Yeah.
Like the obviously the one against UNC that shut down a UNC drive, one he returned for a touchdown against Notre Dame, and one to set up what should have been the game-winning
score
touchdown against West Virginia.
Wow. Yeah.
And they were all big time plays too. It wasn't like he got the ball.
Wasn't like the quarterback threw it right too.
Yeah. The UNC one, he ripped the ball away from the receiver.
Yeah.
Obviously, the West Virginia game, if they convert that first down, the game was over.
Mm-hmm.
And Waller made a play, got the Hokies a chance to win the game, and then obviously the Notre Dame one. That really flipped the momentum. It looked like Notre Dame had a chance to go take over that game. He got the pick six to give them the lead. So defensive MVP, you guys are going Jordan Williams, which again could have been Jermaine Waller if he was able to stay a little bit healthier towards the end of the season. Offensive MVP, an offense that was up and down most of the season. Couple of options here.
Blackshear.
I'm going with an oddball pick. I'm going to go with Braxton Burmeister. He's the most valuable player because if he'd stayed healthy.
Or what if he hadn't?
That's true.
Right. What if he had gotten? Well, he was hurt all year. But what if he got hurt to the point where somebody else had to play? So
that's why MVP is almost always a quarterback award in the NFL because you remove Braxton Burmeister from that team, that's the most impact.
Would Tech have won a game without him? It's a fair question, I think.
Would have leaned heavily on the run. Yeah, I mean, they would have won Richmond, MTSU.
We barely beat those teams. Well, we barely beat Richmond anyway with him, remember? Remember we brought in Knox Kadum against Richmond, and he immediately threw a pick and Richmond scored a touchdown.
See how valuable Braxton Burmeister is?
Right. Okay, so I agree. Burmeister is the most valuable player.
We can go offensive player of the year.
Player of the year. Okay. Well, mine's Blackshear.
Got to be Blackshear.
I think it has to be.
And I think he should file criminal charges for not touching the ball for the first half of the season. I thought that was ridiculous.
And getting two touches against Miami.
Exactly. I mean, he should have been a 1,000-yard rusher. He was good enough to.
If you're going to talk to the police about Raheem Blackshear, then you need to file a missing persons report for some of the games.
Yeah.
Like where was he during those games before you go?
When he was dominating Notre Dame, and they're just like, you know what? We're just not going to let him touch the ball for the last 25 minutes. Anyway.
We'll let Chris get on his soapbox.
I can't wait till next year when we find things to pick on about Brent Pry and his decisions.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't something to pick on. Like, this isn't a little nitpick. This is just a gigantic. It's your best player, and you don't give him the ball. That's not a nitpick. Anyway.
Hey, we can do it because we get nitpicked all the time. Just look at the comments of our articles and the comments of our YouTube videos.
Of course, yeah.
Nitpicking is fair and expected.
All right, well, those are our awards for the 2021 season. Let's wrap up football talk with a general question. The Fuente era is now over in Blacksburg. How do you think it will be remembered? When you look back 10 years from now, how do you think the Fuente era will be remembered?
I laughed, I cried, it became a part of me.
I hope it's remembered as a very poor era, because if it's remembered as a poor era,
that means it got better.
That means Pry is going to be really good, and obviously the Beamer era was very good, and ideally Justin Fuentes is the worst of those three eras. Now, if we're having the same conversation 5 years from now about Brent Pry's replacement and things like that, then we're just going to be like, Justin Fuente was just another football coach.
It's that old thing, if it's not you, it's me.
Right,
if we're right back here 5 years
ago. Right. So it's like, remember like a year or so ago when NC State wanted to fire their coach. But when you actually look at his winning percentage, it's better than any NC State coach since the 70s. It's like, so like that guy's a pretty good coach. It's just they haven't had. It's just their program.
I feel like he missed his window this year, man. With Clemson being down, he could have. Anyway, I don't want to go down that path. I think we will recall the Justin Fuente era as the era of the skinny legs.
Yes.
On all of our football players. No, but to answer the question seriously, it's if you think about where Virginia, and I've talked about this before. If you think about where Virginia Tech fans are mentally now versus where they were at the end of Frank's tenure. At the end of Frank's tenure, it was, everything's okay. It's just Frank's kind of run out of gas. And at the end of the Fuente era, you're like, wow, there's a lot of structural stuff we have to fix with the program.
Right. And I don't think that, like, as a fan base, we would have recognized that under Frank so much, because we would have just said, Frank's just getting older, and that's all it is. I still think when Fuente flirted with Baylor, it opened up some people's eyes. Yeah. And I wrote after that happened that, if good things come out of that if we get the ball rolling with monetary support and things like that to match other programs, then long term he could end up being a net positive for Virginia Tech because of that. And he still might. That might turn out to be the case. I mean, we've seen the amount of money they're giving to Brent Pry. And when you give the next coach a lot of money, that's part admitting that, man, we really should have given our old coach more resources, right?
Here's the problem. Is so you had your Mustang GT and everybody else was an IROC Camaro. So you took your Mustang GT and you turbocharged it. You said that guy's in trouble now, and he rolls up for the next drag race in a Lamborghini.
Right.
And that's the Lamborghini is the SEC and the Big Ten now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So and we're experiencing that right now with there's some at least in my head there's some I don't know if frustration is the right word, but Virginia Tech has so greatly increased their funding for assistant coaches from $3.5 million to $5.5 million. That's a big leap for Virginia Tech. And it happens right at the time when, as we've gone over, Michigan State's throwing $9.5 million at Mel Tucker. USC's doing just insane, obscene things with Lincoln Riley, to where you just kind of raising your hand, goes, anybody paying attention to us? We're doing good stuff over here. Anybody notice? And so it's I've gone off on a tangent.
Well, it's a different era of football now.
It is.
And
that's the biggest thing that happened in the Fuente era was our realization.
Exactly. And it started during the Beamer era, but we didn't fully grasp it until after Fuente got here. And you're grasping it more and more every year. I mean, look what Miami's doing with their football program right now. I mean, they're actually taking the profits from their hospital system and throwing it into their football program. How corrupt can you possibly be? I mean,
how much is my surgery costing and why?
Why? Oh, well.
We had to hire a new defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and we gotta get this 5-star offensive lineman. He needs his nap room.
I'm getting my gallbladder removed. I want free season tickets in exchange for getting my gallbladder removed.
Right. So, I just think the levels people are going to win at college football is ridiculous these days. But the money's there, right? They're like. If big donors are stepping in to pay all this extra money that the schools themselves can't afford because the cost of scholarships and coaching salaries have all exploded, then like that's somebody else's money. They're willing to do it. And like if we have problems with college football, ultimately it's our fault because we watch.
If you want to write me a $2 million check to expand Tech sideline, I'll expand Tech sideline.
Right.
I will spend your money.
You'll spend your money, exactly. So it's like somebody put this the other way, and I forget who I was talking to, but they said like people complain about college football and then continue to watch college football. It's like complaining about things gas does to the environment and then continuing to drive. It's just you complain about it,
slapping a turbocharger on your Mustang.
But it's still what everybody does, right?
Gas is expensive. Right. You're still driving.
Still driving to work.
So I used to get indignant about this stuff, but I'm actually just I'm just watching all of it, and I'm like, this is ludicrous, and it's actually getting kind of fun to watch.
It's actually kind of comical. Like what is the most ridiculous thing I'm going to see next? Right. Like I mean, Miami actually using profits from their health system to pay for their football program sounds like the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. But I give it 2 or 3 years, somebody's going to one up that. I guarantee.
I'm pulling out the Mike Young popcorn and just going, okay, what's next, man? I just
Michigan State's paying $9.5 million to a guy with 17 wins.
Right. I could do the math on that.
And it looks like the next craziest thing that happened, I saw yesterday, the favorite to take over for Mario Cristobal at Oregon, none other than Oregon's former coach, Chip Kelly.
Really?
So we could see a reunion in Eugene as well.
It's become great theater. It really has.
Yeah,
this might be the most exciting offseason college football has had ever.
When the Miami Sports Information Department tells the media, please don't ask our coach the process of how he got hired. What does that
Don't ask him how he got here. He's here. That's all you need to know.
And every journalist worth his salt is going, excuse me? And it's just fascinating to watch.
Well, going back to the original question, we went off on a little tangent there. Justin Fuente era, we may not know how it'll be remembered for 5 years, just like we may not know how the Brent Pry hire will be viewed in 5 years. We'll just have to wait and see. Before we get to Katie, just like PTI, we got to do errors and omissions. I wrote down, I wanted to mention Chris Marv recruited both of Alex Orji's brothers to Vanderbilt.
Right.
I know that was a big thing, so it's certainly not going to hurt the pursuit of keeping him in Blacksburg.
Apparently, there's rumors on like a Michigan 247 site that he's going to visit Michigan this weekend instead of Virginia Tech.
Fantastic.
So,
and Josh Gaddis was just named Broyles Award
winner. He's a great coordinator. I remember
Michigan
earlier this
offensive
year,
coordinator.
Michigan fans were complaining about him. Point being, fans always hate their play calling, even when he's the Broyles Award winner.
And then I just if he
Offensive coordinator is the toughest job in the world.
if he does go up there, I know how they're going to negative recruit Virginia Tech. I think I did it probably about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. So we will have to wait and see. Signing day a week from today, early signing day. So we've got a little bit of time to figure out who's going to stay and who's going to sign in that 2022.
At least we know what
Virginia
your
Tech
podcast
class.
is going to be. You're going to be here next week, right?
I will be here all week next week. So
Don't forget to tip your waiter.
yes, I'll be here all week, and then we'll see. I'm going to be all over the country after that over winter break. So with that, it's been almost 45 minutes. Let's hand it over to Katie.
So before I get into tidbits and trivia, I want to start out by posing a question to you all. Did you see Bud Foster's tweet from 2 days ago?
Yeah, he was talking about players opting out of the bowl game.
Yeah, for
right?
context, I'll read it. He said, "I really don't understand college players across the country opting out of their team's bowl game. For 90% of you, if not higher, it's going to be the last game you'll ever play. Enjoy the experience because it's short. Hashtag finish with your brother." So what are your thoughts on that? Every guy that's opted out for us so far is not playing in the bowl game, besides Brock Hoffman as of today.
Right. That's a good question.
So wait a minute, what's the Brock Hoffman news?
He's going to declare for the draft. He's not going to take his 6th year, his COVID year, and he's going to go to the NFL instead.
Is he going to play in the bowl game?
Yes, he's going to play in the bowl game. I think Bud is right
for him.
to a certain extent. I think I don't blame guys that are definitely going to get drafted because, like, if you have an injury there, that's going to cost you money. But, like, in my opinion, like, I don't mean this to be negative because I just named him my MVP, but Jordan Williams is not going to get drafted and will probably never play in an NFL game. So from his perspective, Bud's absolutely right. I mean, I don't think Trey Turner's going to get drafted, and I don't think most of our guys are going to get drafted.
We went into the season saying Amari Barno might be a 2nd round, 3rd round pick. And now it feels like
he'll get drafted, but I don't think it's going to be very high.
No.
So yeah, for a couple of those Tech players, I do think they're skipping the last football game that they'll ever play in. So he's got a point. I think it depends on the player and the specific situation. Sorry to say that about those guys. They just don't strike me as NFL players.
I wrote it down. Jordan Williams will not get drafted, nor will Trey Turner.
You wrote it down.
All right, we got it written down.
We have the receipts.
Our show on whatever it is, May 1st or April 30th.
No, just because you get drafted doesn't mean you'll ever play in a football game.
I know,
6th
I'm
and
just
7th
teasing.
round picks get cut all the time, man.
I'm just teasing.
You know what I mean.
My Tennessee Titans cut their 4th round pick this year. So
let me address the topic. That's yet another thing I used to get indignant and irate about. Players opting out of bowl games, and it was the last podcast where we had this interesting discussion that maybe bowl games should be shifted to the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
It's and that's a whole. We talked about it already. Don't want to reopen that can of worms, but I'm getting where I don't get worked up about anything that happens.
It's hard to take it serious when sometimes you've got a bowl game scheduled and then your position coach leaves, or I mean, you're going to tell a Notre Dame player you have to take your bowl game seriously when Brian Kelly just left.
When there was still a chance for them to reach the college football playoff,
Right,
too.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just think, and there's so many bowls. If there wasn't 80-plus teams in bowls, it would be one thing. Yeah. But making bowl games used to be special. Like, when Tech made the Independence Bowl to start the bowl streak, there were only 19 bowls that year. Only 38 teams made bowls.
And we loaded up a couple cars and drove down the street.
Because it was really hard to make a bowl, so they were special. And now they're not special anymore because 2/3 of college football makes a bowl game, at least. It would be like over 200 teams making the NCAA tournament, right? NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be special then. It's special because only 68 teams make it.
Yep.
And you don't see guys opt out of the NCAA tournament for the NBA draft. So I just think it's I don't know that they do have to take a hard look at bowl games and how they're done, and they came into existence to stimulate local economies, but now they're all just TV money is what it's about.
Yeah. So the number is 68% of teams make bowl games, 88 out of 130.
Cool.
Yep.
I said 2/3.
Yep.
And that you
matter of fact, you're darn close to 2/3. It's 0.677.
And you might understand first round picks. If you feel like you're going to be picked on the first day, maybe you opt out to avoid injury. But again, after that, it becomes a little bit more.
I've become desensitized to it.
Me too. It just really doesn't bother me. I'm not blaming any of those guys. But yes, I do agree with Bud for the standpoint of some of those guys did just decide to opt out of the last football game they'll probably ever play in. Yeah.
Moving on to basketball, and unfortunate news this past Saturday, Wake Forest shot 63.5% from the field, the highest mark by any Virginia Tech opponent since Dayton in 2019, and the highest field goal percentage by an ACC team in any game this season. So in basketball, we give ACC teams a heck of a day, and in football, we give ACC teams their first conference win.
Ooh, and I remember that Dayton game. That was the Obi Toppin game.
Yes, it was the day after Tech beat Michigan State.
Right. So except Wake Forest did not have Obi Toppin. Wake Forest had a bunch of nobodies, and they still
had Kadeem C.
That was the disappointing part of it.
Yes, Dayton won that game 89-62.
I remember they were just basically dunking all over Tech.
Dayton probably would have been a number 1 seed that year if COVID hadn't hit.
Yeah,
they were a dominant team. I think they were like 28-2.
Like what happened to Toppin?
He was the 8th overall pick to the Knicks. I'm not sure how he's done since he got into the league, but top 10 pick.
Yeah,
cool name.
Yeah.
And then lastly, Virginia Tech basketball takes on Cornell tonight for the first time in program history. What one other team on the schedule had they never played before?
One other
team on the schedule. I could cheat by looking at the schedule.
Was it Maine?
No.
It wasn't Maine.
No, they had played Maine once before.
It was Merrimack. Is that right?
It's got to be Merrimack. Yeah, it's Merrimack.
Okay.
Definitely. Duh. Yeah.
So hopefully we have the same good fortune.
Yeah, because Merrimack only jumped up to Division I like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay. Yep. Well, we're going to talk about that Cornell game after the break. We went a little long on football, but I think the basketball segment will be a little bit shorter. We've been told to shorten the podcast, so the second half should be shorter than the first one, I hope, if we don't want a 2-hour podcast. We'll talk Cornell. We will talk Dayton. We just talked about the Dayton game in Maui 2 years ago. Hokies traveled to Dayton on Sunday as well to face off with them for the first time since that Obi Toppin game. All of that is coming up on episode 215 of the Tech Sideline podcast, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Stay with us. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back on episode 215 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We have a new change on set. David Cunningham, managing editor of Tech Sideline, is taking over Will's spot across the way. Second straight time on a Wednesday, we've had a little line change in the middle of the podcast. David comes on to talk basketball. His preview of Cornell and Dayton is up on the website right now. Before we hop into hoops, if you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're in the live stream, leave a question or comment for, I guess now, David or Chris about basketball or football, as we already have gone through the new coaching news and also a year in review for the football team. But let's talk men's basketball. This week feels like kind of a turning point of the season. You can either go one way, you get two big wins against Cornell and Dayton, you're 8-3. You lose one, you're in danger of possibly being 500 or worse heading into the new year.
Yeah, can't lose to Cornell at home. No. That would not be ideal.
Yeah, this is tonight. The Wednesday game against Cornell tonight is a game you have to win.
Yes.
The Dayton game, it's on the road, so it's I guess you got a little bit more leeway, but that's still a game that you should win.
You need to make up the Wake Forest game somewhere.
Yes.
Yes, and Cornell tonight, they're 8-1, but again, an Ivy League team probably should win that one. Dayton on the road on Sunday, 2 p.m. tip-off there. Hokies are 2-0 on true road games so far this season. So a chance there for another big win. Let's start with Cornell, though. 8-1, but again, against the only good team they've really played is Penn State, and that was the game that they lost. They are a fast team, though. They are second in the country in scoring, 91.2 points per game. And Mike Young on Tech Talk Live on Monday said they're one of the fastest teams of the country and he used the analogy calling them a herd of buffalo running down the court.
Yeah, and so the head coach of Cornell is Brian Earl, Dan Earl's brother, who coaches at VMI. And VMI plays not as quickly, but they play at a pretty fast pace too. But this is going to be another game. We saw it against Memphis, a couple weeks ago in Brooklyn, where Memphis likes getting out in transition. But this is a team that literally like UNC fast, where it's like bucket goes up, turn, outlet, you're up the court in 3 seconds, and there's a bucket.
They want to score 100.
Yeah, Cornell's trying to push the pace, and I think it'll be a battle of wills. Just can Virginia Tech get a little bit of a run out early, and then can Virginia Tech's defense settle down, and especially after the playing poor defense against Wake Forest, can the defense settle down, get some stops, let them control the tempo, and kind of coast for the rest of the game?
And 122 points for Cornell in their last game. Again, it was against
a D3 school.
Keuka College, a D3 school. But they know how to put points on the board. That's going to be the Hokies' key, especially after last game where they couldn't stop Wake Forest all that much, 65% shooting. You'd think it's going to be lower than that tonight, at least you would hope.
Yeah, you would think there had been some defensive practice going on this week. Tech didn't play very well on either end of the court against Wake Forest. I mean, when you lose by 19 at home, I mean, that's certainly the case. But probably the more disappointing part was defensively, and giving up all those free cutters to the basket really is what was the disappointing part to me. So hopefully that's been emphasized. This is a game Tech should win. I know Cornell's 8-1, but their schedule has not been the most difficult in the world, but it's a game that Tech should win. And then you've got a couple of old A-10 foes coming up. Dayton and then St. Bonaventure. And you really want to win both of those games, man. I wouldn't have foreseen Virginia Tech starting the meat of their conference schedule with just like one decent win. Thought they'd win at least a couple of those, and I wouldn't have seen them losing at home to Wake Forest. So it's been disappointing from that standpoint, and it's a long way to go. And in case you didn't notice, the ACC is not very good. Like
UVA last night, losing to JMU.
Right
at JMU.
Yes, and that's their fourth loss.
Yeah, they're six. UVA's 6-4.
It's just not a great league. So to be honest with you, I mean, Tech went up there and to New York and lost to Xavier and Memphis. There's just are those teams worse than ACC teams? I'm not sure that they are. I look around this league and I just don't see a whole lot of quality this year. So I'm not by any means am I giving up on this season. It's
a long way to go.
But you have to start winning some games at some point, and I feel like you need obviously win this one tonight and win one of those next two. I'd love to win both of them. That would make me feel a lot better.
Yeah, I think it starts this week, and this is a Cornell team that shoots the ball really well. Every single player, all 5 of their starters, shoot the ball better than 46%, and they're a really good 3-point shooting team. They've scored. They played 9 games and hit double-digit 3-pointers in 6 of those games. So the teams they played haven't been fantastic, obviously. Against Penn State shut them down defensively, and Penn State hit threes of their own. That's what Tech's going to have to do. But this is a Cornell team that can pose some problems, and then Dayton is big and lengthy and very, very efficient shooting-wise. And then, St. Bonaventure next week, everybody knows at the Bonnies. They were the A10 champs last year. So,
well, I'm in the hospitality area tonight, so if Tech start losing, you don't want them to start winning. But no, the one thing let's change the subject a little bit to Dayton. One thing I noticed is they start like 4 freshmen.
Yeah, they're very
extremely young team. So that's why you can start off 0-3. And with some inexplicable losses, and then beat Kansas.
Yeah, beat Miami, beat Kansas, beat Belmont. Those are all top 100 teams per KenPom. And like you said, they're starting about 3-4 freshmen a game, but they're a really efficient shooting team. They've got about they're a kind of a lengthier team, kind of like a combination of Memphis and Xavier, where they've got two guys that are taller than Aluma and Mutz.
It's kind of a typical Dayton team, I think.
Yeah. But this is going to be a team that is going to really test Tech's defense, because they're going to be really, really efficient shooting the ball. They get the ball inside. They don't really take a lot of threes. So in a way, it's a lot like Xavier, where now that I said that, they're probably going to go and hit 23s like the one guy for Nate Johnson did for Xavier. But this is a team that is really going to give Tech fits on the inside, and Tech's going to have to be really disciplined defensively. And these are 2 games, 2 contrasting styles. But when you just lost a game by 19 at home, probably potentially the worst defensive performance in the Mike Young era, you could say. And Mike said on Tech Talk Live, and that they had a good practice on Monday, and that they're going to be prepared. And I think you turn to the veteran leadership on this team, but yeah, these are 2 games ahead of St. Bonaventure, Duke, and North Carolina that you need to win just to get your footing back and to get back on the right track.
Because the chances of winning Duke and Carolina on the road are slim.
Yeah,
Duke's obviously playing well, with the exception of their last game, of course. And look, this year, Coach K's last year, you ain't going to get a single call on Cameron Indoor Stadium, so you might as well write that one off.
And Tech's only won in King Cameron one time ever,
right,
and that
exactly.
was in 2006.
Yeah. So you can win at Carolina because they're not a very good defensive team, but you've got to get your own defense straightened out before then.
Yeah, Cornell really the last tune-up non-conference game for Virginia Tech this season. Dayton, again, you guys mentioned, lost some inexplicable games. 3 straight bye games. They lost all of them. UMass Lowell, Lipscomb, and Austin Peay. Then they go to the ESPN Events Invitational, and within 4 days beat Miami, Kansas, and Belmont. And then since then, they're 2-0. It's Alabama State and Northern Illinois, but they've outscored them by 77 points combined in those 2 games. So Dayton, a very strange team to look at that schedule.
Hey, at least it's at Dayton.
Dayton, one of the best environments you'll see.
Yeah.
Well, and they didn't play well at home earlier.
That's true.
This year.
They did not.
Yeah. So
but Dayton's like a really good mid-major environment and a great mid-major.
Yeah, I'll be at the game. It sits about 13,000. So that's, I'm excited to experience that. But yeah, I think that's like you mentioned earlier, Jake. Tech is 2-0 on the road this year. A win at Navy. They had to grind out a win at Maryland where they were down and they weren't playing well at all, and they basically had to gut their way through it. And we've seen where Maryland has gone since then. Maryland, fired Turgeon and Mark Turgeon, and then lost 2 games. I think they lost to Northwestern for the first time in program history the other night.
Right.
So, the quality wins are not looking so high quality, but this is another chance where it seems like Tech always plays pretty well, at least last year and this year in road environments under Mike Young. Mike gets these guys prepared to play, and I'm interested to see. This should be a win tonight against Cornell, and then I'm interested to see how Tech defends the length, the size, and it's an inexperienced team, very like Memphis, where they're it's kind of half and half. But this is a game where if you can win it on the road, you've got 3. I'm not going to say quality because I don't know how quality the Maryland one will be by the end of the season, but you got 3 decent road wins over a Navy team that is going to be pretty good, a Dayton team that should be pretty good, and a Maryland team that could be good if they ever figure it out. And then you go into the last 3 games of the season against St. Bonaventure, at Duke, and at North Carolina, and those are games where you're going to need to play your best basketball no matter what.
And if you win both these games this week, you would probably feel good just stealing one of those next 3. St. Bonaventure, Duke, UNC. If you can get one and at least play close in the other 2, you would feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I really want to win these next 3. Because, I mean, what if Tech only beats Cornell and then they lost the next 4?
Yeah.
And then you're sitting there, what?
7-7.
7-7.
Yeah.
No, who would have guessed that at the beginning of the year? I certainly would have. That'd be a huge disappointment. Like, everybody all year, when the football team was struggling, it's like, I can't wait till basketball season to have something good to talk about.
Yeah.
So hopefully they can get it turned around soon. The thing I like about basketball is when you get a really good seat, like you can look at their faces and see their expressions and have an understanding of their emotions. And I had really good seats for the game the other day, and I just don't like some of the body language. Like, I don't like it how every time Keve Aluma misses a shot, he just turns around and scowls at the ref, as if it's the ref's fault every single time. So I think when players do that, that means they're not mentally dialed in anyway. They're not focusing on what's important.
Yep.
So I think some things like that are our biggest issue. I'm not going to be able to. I'm sitting way up top in the crow's nest tonight with you. And,
yes.
So I'm not going to be able to see those facial expressions and things like that tonight. But for anybody who's sitting closer, maybe they can let us know.
Well, for the Dayton game, I'll be sitting like, I think right under the basket next to the Tech bench. So, so that'll be
some good stuff down there.
Yeah, an experience. Yeah, and I mean, I always find it interesting, especially where you can sit courtside. To hear what the coaches and players are saying, or to be able to look at the players kind of like that. But yeah, I mean, this is the first time in the Mike Young era that Tech started 0-1 in the ACC too. So
wow.
So two wins against Clemson in 2019 and 2020 to start the season. You go into your next games are at Duke and at Carolina, and it's like it does not get any more difficult than that in the ACC. I think the only two places that would be more difficult to play would be at Florida State and at Louisville, just because Tech does not play well there. But like, these are 2 of the toughest games, and now you're behind the 8 ball. You're 0-1, and you need a win. Yeah. Imagine if something happens and Tech doesn't win either the Duke or the North Carolina game.
You start 0-3. That's a tough hole to dig out of.
Yeah, but at least the ACC is not great.
That is true.
Right. So
and the schedule's favorable.
You're capable of digging yourself out of it.
Yes.
So Duke's the best team in the ACC, or at least it looks like they
most
are
talented
right now.
Team.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so who would you say that? I don't know. I'm not asking who's the number 2 in the standings right now, but who has looked like the second best team so far? I don't think anybody has.
Not really.
No. I mean, there are some teams. I think North Carolina and Louisville have both looked okay. I think,
but I mean, Carolina can't play defense. Yeah, they can't play a lick of D, or they couldn't earlier in the season. So like, every other team, you see like major flaws, I think. So it's going to be about who fixes their flaws between now and the end of the season. Every team's got them. It's about who fixes them.
Yeah. And Florida State struggled. We mentioned UVA 6-4, and if it weren't for a last 10 seconds run to beat Pitt, they'd be 5-5.
Yeah. I think UVA. I mean, when in the preseason poll, I had UVA like 6th or 7th because I did not think UVA was going to be that good. I was high on Syracuse. I thought Syracuse was going to be pretty good, and
they gave up 100 to Colgate.
Yes,
at home.
I mean, and they've improved since then, but they got blown up by Villanova, a really good Villanova team last night.
They were up at halftime though.
They were, but
they kept it close.
But more importantly, I mean, Florida State got blown up by Purdue. I mean, that's a team that they should have hung around with.
Well, Purdue might be the best team in college basketball.
They might, but you would still think an upper echelon ACC team
would
like
hang around. Yeah, I mean, it was almost a 20. I think it was
21.
Yeah,
I think was the final.
20-point loss. So I mean, there's not. Like, it's like just when you think Georgia Tech, who won the ACC tournament last year, Georgia Tech has looked okay, but they don't have any good wins. They don't have any bad losses.
Yeah, that was fool's gold.
Yeah.
I like it.
I mean,
is Wake Forest the second best team in the ACC?
I mean, as far as like how they've looked, maybe what I saw the other day, you can make that argument.
Make the argument.
I just don't think there's that many good teams in the ACC.
I
think the quality of basketball in this league, and I know nostalgic people would dispute this, that it's just not nearly as good a league as it used to be, in my opinion. It just some of it is maybe that it's more teams, so the talent is more diluted and spread out. I don't know, but I think a lot of it is the SEC and the Big Ten just having a lot more money now, and they're just getting better coaches and better players.
They decided they want to be good at basketball now, not just football.
I remember when ACC expansion happened in 2004. That first year Tech was in the ACC. The ACC's media payouts per team was more than any other conference in the country. Wow. And since then, it's just been all downhill for us and all uphill for them as far as money goes. So that has to have something to do.
Yeah,
with
well, and
it.
I think in terms of players, the transfer portal has so much to do with the parity. I mean, you look at Wake Forest. You said Wake Forest is a bunch of nobodies, but some of those nobodies, Jake LaRavia and Alondes Williams, they both transferred in the offseason
at Oklahoma.
Yeah, so these are guys that were okay, got players at other teams, but they decided to come to Steve Forbes and Wake Forest. And this was a Wake Forest team that was horrid last year, and now they're probably going to be a mid-tier team in the ACC this year because the rest of the ACC is bad. You look at a team like Notre Dame, who's lost its last 2 or 3 games, who I thought was going to be decent this year because they've got a ton of talent returning, a ton of veterans returning, and they added a guy like Paul Atkinson from Yale. And Notre Dame has just been bad. And
Mike Bryce seems to have lost it.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got your Dukes and Carolinas, and they're going to be at the top. And I think Hubert Davis trying to figure out how to coach defense in the ACC as a full-time head coach. You said North Carolina don't play much defense. They've shown that. But I think just in general, teams like 3, if you say North Carolina's 2, teams 3 through like 12, there's so much parity. I think you can say Pitt is the worst team in the ACC. But everybody between that, it's kind of just a toss-up. That's why these 3 games, especially, Dayton St. Bonaventure are so crucial because if you can work out the kinks from the Wake Forest game, you can really gain momentum going forward because if Virginia Tech wins the next 3 games and they're 3-0 heading into a road game at Duke, that is going to be a really, really big test because these could be 2 of the best teams in the conference this year. Mm-hmm. So I think that is even more why these next 2-3 games are so crucial is because everybody's trying to figure it out, like you said, Chris. Everybody's trying to figure out, whoever fixes the mistakes best wins. Is going to be towards the top of the league, and it's coming into the crunch time where some teams are going to have more favorable schedules to start December and January where they don't have to go on the road to Duke and Carolina.
Within a week with Christmas in between.
Yeah.
So don't pay too much attention to the records early because everybody's schedules is going to go up and down.
Yeah, but I think
the
down the back stretch, Tech has a fairly favorable schedule until like mid-February. It doesn't get like really, really difficult when they've
got the week of Syracuse, UNC, UVA all at once, which looked tougher heading into the season than it may be now.
Yeah, but the point is, I think it's these 2 games makes it for a very front heavy schedule for Virginia Tech. Everything else is spread out, and if you can figure out your stuff this week, next week, you're going to be in really good shape going forward. And I think you're going to be in a lot better shape than a lot of the teams in the ACC.
Well, let's wrap up basketball talk with this. I think the defensive struggles we saw against Wake Forest may have been just a one-off kind of thing. It's one of those things where you just weren't ready for that game, and hopefully that's worked out tonight. But the offense, I'm not sure it's time to hit the panic button quite yet. And again, level of competition has a lot to do with this. First 5 games, Tech was shooting over 50%. Last 4 games, they're shooting 38% from the floor. Is it if Tech can't figure this out in the next 3 games, is that time to hit the panic button on the offense?
Maybe. I think there have been times where Tech hasn't executed their offense well. I also think there's been times where they just flat missed wide open shots more than they normally would.
Yeah.
Some of that, like towards the end of like the Xavier game and towards the end of the Memphis game, could be down to fatigue. Like I don't think you can play Keve Aluma almost 40 minutes a game and expect him to play as well in the last 5 minutes of a game. You need to work. Try to work your depth a little bit more. Get Ogiaco involved a little bit more. Maybe Darius Maddox deserves equal minutes as Naheem Aline and Hunter Couture, and that becomes a complete three-man rotation between those two spots with all of them playing equal minutes.
And Mike Young did say that he thinks Maddox will get more minutes moving forward.
Yeah,
he said that on
I think he said
Live.
he was going to try to give Maddox like 17 to 18 minutes on Tech Talk Live, and I think that's huge going for it. And the Ojiako, the Ojiako thing, he didn't even play. I mean,
until the final minute.
I asked Mike Young about that, and he played 2 minutes in the loss to Wake Forest. And this is a game where down the stretch, I mean, last like 6 minutes, Tech it's slipping away, but he didn't play against Xavier either. And so I'm interested to see how Mike Young tweaks the rotation and gets David Gasson and John Ojiako more minutes.
Yeah, because it's not like Ojiako was playing bad earlier in the season. He looked like a better player.
Yeah, and I think one of the things Mike Young was talking about is the matchups. And Ojiako's not as fleet-footed as Keve Aluma and Justin Mutz are, which you don't expect him to.
Yeah.
But he's gotten a lot better as a defender.
Sure.
His feet have gotten better, and he's a rim protector. And I think letting Keve Aluma breathe for a good portion of the game, so he's not gassed after 35 minutes. Keve Aluma, his stamina's not bad. It's pretty good, but you can't play him 40 minutes every single game without subbing him out.
Yeah. And I think a player that a lot of people are going to be looking at this week, Storm Murphy. Last 4 games, 20% from the field, 1 of 12 from three-point range.
Yeah, and he's taken a couple of ill-advised shots there, but for the most part, he's missed open looks.
Yeah.
And open looks are the same in the ACC and the Southern Conference.
Yeah.
And the basketball is the same
size
and
so's
the
the
same
rim.
length. So I think he'll be okay from a shooting aspect. I don't worry about that too much.
And he had those 6 turnovers against Memphis. He's cleaned that up. Only 2 in the last 3 games since.
So that's much improved. I think Tech has bigger issues than Storm Murphy.
Yeah.
Think about it. He hasn't been scoring much, but
But Kevin Aluma and Justin Mutz have been.
Right.
Mutz 31 points in the last 2 games.
Right. So you let's say you replace Storm Murphy with Wabi Sabiti in the last game. Okay, Wabi Sabiti's not going to score either.
Yeah,
he might play a little better defense.
So maybe a little better defense, but most of the defensive issues were on the inside and not on the outside. So same result.
Yeah, I think a lot of what was going on with Murphy was confidence. I mean, that's just what it looked like.
Right.
Where he and that's what Mike Young said, where he felt like he had to do everything. He had to prove that he belonged in the ACC, and I think he settled down a lot after you said that Memphis win, only 2 turnovers in the last 3 games.
Yes.
I mean, that is huge. He's taking care of the ball, and I think the shot will come. I think the 3-man rotation between Maddox, Couture, and Aline is very interesting to watch because Aline and Couture, neither one of them had a great game against Wake Forest, but for the most part, they are usually, at least one of the two is on every game. Interior, I think there were just some defensive lapses, and that's why I'm not going to completely judge Tech off that game. Once Tech plays these next 2 games, they've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from the Dayton game to the St. Bonaventure game to regroup. After these next 2 games, I'm interested to see how Tech stacks up defensively now, how the rotation looks, how the trends are going in terms of how guys are shooting and how guys are performing confidence-wise, because I think there were some routine plays that I thought Justin Mutz would have made in that Wake Forest game. He just didn't make. Like, he just got caught ball watching and a backdoor cut. And it's like Justin Mutz doesn't do that. Right. So I'm curious, but in general, Storm Murphy, I think he's gotten a lot better. And if he can continue on the trajectory that he's been on, because he had 7 points in the last game, I think. He made at least 1 shots, 3.
Yeah. I think that's the only 3 he's made in the last 4 games.
Yeah, and I could tell, he kind of skipped down the court a little bit afterwards, and I could tell, I think he just needs to make a shot or 2.
You need to see one go down.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with any shooter.
I think Aluma needs to do better because so many teams are guarding him one-on-one.
Yeah.
And he's the first team All-ACC player.
Yep.
He shouldn't be able to guard him one-on-one. right? But they are successfully guarding him one-on-one. If he can play better against those one-on-one schemes and make more people help against him, then I think the ball starts moving better and the offense starts looking better as a result.
Yeah, I agree. Because there were a lot of times, especially against Wake Forest, where it was just him up against Dallas Walton or Kadeem C, and he got the ball and he turns and tries a hook shot, one that he usually can get to go down, and it just wasn't going down.
Yeah.
And if he can get that to go down, coaches are going to have to draw a double team, like you said. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities because, I think it goes back to what Mike Young said. These are not – the guys haven't been taking necessarily bad shots. Just hasn't been going down, but you give them – an extra second or two to shoot the ball where they don't have a guy in their face, I think it goes a long way.
And I think tonight may be a confidence booster for the Hokies. Hopefully, if they can start to figure out those little lapses they had defensively and maybe start to make some shots against a Cornell team that isn't fantastic on the defensive side, more of an offensive-minded team. With that, we're running a little long. Let's check in with Katie in the YouTube chat, maybe get one or two questions here.
Yeah, we'll do one. This is a football question from Elijah Sargent. How bad is the offensive situation? Minus quarterback, is it a complete rebuild, or is there enough pieces to sell the young talent to an offensive coordinator?
I mean, I think with the transfer portal these days, I mean, you can become a better team a lot quicker than you would otherwise. Virginia Tech potentially bring in a transfer wide receiver or two, a transfer tight end, and if they feel the need to have a transfer quarterback, and be a lot better just like that. I think the offensive line, even though they lost a lot of key pieces, I do feel like they bring back a good core in Clements and Caden Moore. I mean, I assume Raheem Blackshear is going to play another year. He didn't go through senior day.
Yeah.
He hasn't announced that he's entering the portal or anything like that. So I'm thinking he's going to play another year, but I don't know it for a fact. That's a darn nice piece to build an offense around.
And you hope the next offensive coordinator will get him over the 1,000-yard mark.
Yeah,
and you have Malachi Thomas hopefully coming back
hopefully,
too.
Hopefully one that has hit the weight room in the offseason so he can be a little more durable. I can say that for a lot of people. But anyway, I think it depends on who you can pull in from the portal. I mean, I think it's a rebuild job to a certain extent, but with just the players in the program right now and the incoming freshmen, then it's a major rebuild job. Yeah. You could plug some gaps with some portal guys and then do your rebuilding behind the scene and still put sort of like a competent, halfway decent product on the field. But Virginia Tech did not hire Brent Pry for the 2022 season. I mean, they hired him for the long term. So I'm not going to judge him this year. I'm going to judge him on was decision making as far as staff and types of players he recruits and things like that. But it might take a while for him to put his stamp on the program because I think a lot. I mean, we talk about culture and everything like that. I mean, I think some guys are in for a shock as far as the stuff that's going to be required of them now as football players, as opposed to what was not required before. I mean, we heard a story about a guy who in the program who ended up entering the transfer portal and actually ended up transferring to one of the worst programs in the country. But Daryl, he showed up late for something one day, whether it was a meeting, a weight room session, or something. And Daryl Tapp disciplined him for being late. And the guy was surprised and offended at being disciplined because nobody had ever disciplined him before. And that's why Tech went 6-6 this year, and that's why they went 5-6 last year. Not because of what they did on third down and what play call they did. It's because they didn't have any discipline or toughness like that in their program. It wasn't run the right way behind the scenes. And so, I mean, I think you're going to see more guys hit the portal throughout the course of this first 6 months of this coming year. They're not having any interaction with Brent Pry right now. He's out on the road recruiting, and they're about to go home for Christmas, and they're not going to be back till mid-January. So they're going to spend 3 or 4 months with him and a new staff, and they're going to figure out, whoa, this isn't quite like it was before. So listen, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but there are going to be some guys that wash out of this program as a result.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that as a fan because that means the foundation is being built stronger. Yeah. So it's like whenever you rub disinfectant on a cut, it burns at first, right? But it's for the best.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Katie, I think in general, it won't be obvious whether it's a complete rebuild, like how big the rebuild is, until you look at the depth chart heading into fall camp next year, because there are going to be so many players that transfer in and transfer out. I mean, Brent, we talked with Brent Pry after his introductory press conference and asked him, what's the quick fix? And he was like, transfer portal, but everybody's going to the transfer portal. And with the amount of coaches that are going places, I mean, you're going to see players going left and right. I mean, Clemson could be without
both coordinators,
both its offensive and defensive coordinator.
Billy Napier is cleaning house from their recruiting class so far, right?
Yeah. He was saying they may not recruit any 4- and 5-star guys.
I'm sure Florida fans really love to hear that.
But
but anyway, he's weeding guys out of that class he doesn't think are fits. That's what he's doing.
So I think in terms of recruiting, there's going to be a lot of changes, especially with, like you said, the culture that's being built. I'm not sure if there are some other kids that commit to Virginia Tech and then leave. It wouldn't come as a shock to me, just because they committed to one regime and then the culture is so much different that they decommit or go somewhere else. But I think just in general, you won't be able to judge the team as a whole until midsummer, late summer, early fall, just because I don't think they're going to have all of the pieces together yet, because Brent Pry's not going to be able to get all of his guys, and you might be able to judge them at the beginning of the summer, but I mean, there's going to be, like you said, there's probably going to be guys that transfer out in mid-June.
Get your transfers out of the way early instead of after the third year, like Fuente. I think Fuente's tenure would have gone so much better if some of those discontent guys
left immediately.
It left immediately, and I think it just became a toxic atmosphere behind the scenes, and I think he just got softer on those guys as a result of it, and that's really when Tech's player development really dropped off, I think. If we got to be bad this year to be good 2 or 3, 4 years from now, so be it. I'll accept it. I just want the foundation built the right way. I don't want any half measures.
And what stands out to me is what Brent Price said in his introductory press conference. We want to keep this recruiting class intact. We want to keep the guys that are here. But if they don't want to be here, if they want to go somewhere else, we're going to respect that.
Sure.
Because he's going to try to build a culture of guys that fit what, as Buzz Williams always said, they're OKGs. They're our kind of guys. Going to be people that fit the culture. Yeah. It's not going to be people that don't want that when a coach disciplines them, they just turn their head and go, "What the heck was that for?"
I'll say this: there's 1 or 2 guys in the bottom half of Tech's class in terms of the rankings that I would really be hurt if they decommitted. There's 1 or 2 guys in the top half that if they did decide to decommit, it would hurt us in the rankings, and fans would hate that. But I really wouldn't care because I don't quite like them as much as some of the lower guys in the class. And I think recruiting is important and all that, but I think Virginia Tech right now we have more of a culture problem and a buy-in and accountability problem that has to be fixed more so than what decimal point is at the end of somebody's recruit ranking. I think that's silly.
Well, another great question there. Thank you to everybody in the YouTube chat. Wish we could get to more, but we are running up on an hour 45 on this one. It seems like the ones that I think are going to go the shortest end up going the longest.
I would have assumed, judging from the topics today, that we would have been done in like an hour and 15 minutes.
Yes, that was my thought too, but great conversation about football and basketball. Thank you, Katie, for sorting through those for us as well. That'll wrap up episode 215 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Again, on Wednesday. I love having both of you here. What's coming up on techsideline.com over the next couple of days?
I haven't been able to really start working on it yet, but I'll do my inside the numbers on the defense tomorrow. And you just monitor the coaching search on a day-by-day basis, and as far as assistants go, and can't really say exactly what's going to come up on TSL because we don't know what's going to get announced, when it's going to get announced.
Yeah, there are rumors. I've heard a ton of rumors that about assistant coaches, offensive coaches being hired. You guys mentioned Alex Orji earlier in the show. That there's going to be a lot of players that visit this weekend, so you might have some commitment, some decommitments or some new commitments of kids that visit.
Yep.
I will be at Dayton on Sunday and at the game tonight, so I'll have basketball recaps. Chris Hirons will have a recap of the women's game on Sunday, but just in general, this kind of thing is it's interesting because you don't know when coaching hire is going to be announced.
Change on a daily basis. Our plans.
Like I had heard yesterday at about noon that Chris Marv was going to be the new defensive coordinator. So I spent the next couple hours writing it up. At 3:30, I found out, all right, it's going to be announced at 4. And so I was like, all right. So I mean, I had my story done by then. I let Will look at it. But like that's something like day of, you find out, I might find out, okay, it's happening. So it's a very fluid process.
You're going to find out something on Sunday when you're driving to Dayton.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So I guess what we should tell listeners is check techsideline.com every day.
Subscribe.
Again, student subscription's free. Monthly subscription, your first month is free. And just keep checking it because anytime there's news, it'll be up on techsideline.com.
Yeah, and make sure to follow social media too.
Yes, follow social media at TechSideline, and we'll go through all of your social media tags right now. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening here to episode 215. Thank you to Will Stewart, who was on for the first half of the show talking about the football year and also the news with the coaching staff and some of the players. You can find him at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter. Chris Coleman, our only guy who was here the whole show on set. Besides me.
And Katie.
Yes. Well,
and Malcolm.
I mean, among our two analysts here, but Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist, techsideline.com, at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. David, our plug-and-play sub for the second straight week.
Basketball guy.
Yes, exactly. Our basketball expert at the Real D Cunna on Twitter, managing editor for techsideline.com. Once again, Katie Adams always does a great job in the fourth chair, her segment in the middle, and then going through our YouTube chat. Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, hanging in with us. Behind the scenes, our best producer in the land. I'm your host, Jake Lyman, signing off. That does it for episode 215 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Enjoy the game tonight, Hokies fans. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next week.